Hello and welcome back. In this episode we're going to have a go at making a few pillars for the dungeon, and the first thing you'll need to do, just like before, is print out the PDF file that I've linked to in the description. You'll also need an empty toilet roll tube for the main body of the pillar, and then either some thick cardboard or foam board or even some thin cardboard to make the base. In this particular example I'll use both the foam board and the thin cardboard to show a couple of different ways of doing things, and then you can decide for yourself which option you prefer. Okay then, the first thing you need to do is to just take a pair of scissors and cut the toilet roll tube straight down the middle. Then, after you've made sure that the edge is straight, because that's not always the case with these things, measure out a 2-inch wide strip and cut that to size. Next, I'll use the grid on the cutting board just to help square up the end, and then I'll measure out a 3-inch wide strip and cut that to length. So once that's done, we just need to find something to bend the cardboard around, just to tighten up the existing curve a little bit, and you can use a thick marker pen or a regular pen. But what I found is that the syringes that come in those ink refill kits for your printer, they are the perfect size for this kind of thing. So I'll just roll the tube around that first, and then make the curve a little tighter with the small pen, before going back to the syringe and then marking out the point where the cardboard overlaps. Then I'll apply the glue to the overlapping area, wrap the tube back around the syringe and press down nice and tightly, and then set it to one side to dry, preferably with a couple of rubber bands wrapped around it. So while that's drying, we can take the printed texture and start to cut out one of the pillar patterns. And as before, you're going to need to make sure that you're printing these at full size and that you've not got any scaling options enabled. Then we just need to measure out a 3-inch length and then trim it to size. And I'm sure I don't need to say this, but just in case, be careful when using a sharp knife. Okay, so now that the tube's dried and texture's been cut to size, I'll just remove the tube from the syringe and double check to make sure that the texture fits. And that looks okay. And now I'll just take the trusty glue stick and apply some glue to the back of the pattern. And then just wrap it around our little tube. It's as easy as that. So now we need to start work on the base, and the first way of doing this is to cut out a 1-inch square of foam board and a 2-inch square of the plain stone texture. Then we just apply some glue to the foam board and stick it to the middle of the printed texture. Then we just need to wrap the texture around the foam board, and when I'm doing this I like to cut a straight line from the edge of the paper to the corner of the foam board, and then fold the edges over to mark out the thickness of the foam board, just so that I can make another cut towards the bottom corner. This then forms a little tab which we can wrap around the sides of the piece, and I'll sometimes add a slight angle to the edges of these cuts. And finally we'll just cut off the little corner bits that we don't need. Now all that might sound a little bit complicated, but as you can see I've put an illustration on the screen to show the kind of thing I'm aiming for. But as long as you get the top and the sides covered, that's all that really matters. So next I'll just take a glue stick and apply some glue to one of the sides with the wraparound tabs, and then just fold it around the foam board. And I'll then do exactly the same for the other side, trying my best to keep the corners nice and sharp. And there we go. Now all that's left to do is glue and fold the other two edges, and unfortunately this is where my memory card ran out, but you get the idea. But if all that seems like too much bother, a quicker and easier way of making the base is to simply take some of the stone texture and glue it straight onto some thin or single corrugated cardboard. And in this particular example, I'm just using a piece of cardboard from one of those Amazon type packages. So after leaving it to dry for a few minutes, we can then measure and cut out a 1-inch square of the texture, and it should give us a reasonable looking base for the pillar, and you can make them in a fraction of the time. So I'll just make this final cut and then it's done. and here it is next to the other piece that we made a few minutes earlier. Okay then, now it's time to assemble the pillar, so here's our two different bases again. And we'll just take a quick look at what it would look like with the first type of base, and then again with the simple version. But I think we'll go with the simple version for now, and so I'll just use my cheap glue gun to put a circle of glue around the bottom of the pillar, trying to keep it more towards the inside if I can, and then just stick it down to the middle of the base. And there we have it, our finished pillar. However, if you wanted to go the extra mile, you could also add a top to the pillar, so yeah, let's go ahead and do that. So it's exactly the same process, but this time you just need to make sure that the top and the bottom are reasonably well aligned. And if I just get rid of this little bit of excess glue, there's the finished piece. But before heading off, I just thought we'd take a closer look at some of the different ways to assemble the pillars. And in this first example here, I've just used one of the thicker bases. Then, in this next one, I've used a piece of foam board on the top and the bottom, just to get that kind of classic pillar look that everyone's familiar with. And here's the one I've just made, which still looks okay, but perhaps not quite as nice as the last one. Anyway, here's a clearer picture of the three different types. But if I'm honest, I probably prefer the one on the far right, and that's mainly due to the fact that it doesn't have a top on, which means that the height of the ceiling can be a little more vague, if that makes sense. Oh, and I'd just like to say a big thank you to everyone who's commented and subscribed, and please feel free to share these videos with anyone who might be interested in building this kind of thing. I'm not quite sure what the next episode is going to be yet, but keep watching this space as there's still plenty more to come. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.